Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you along to our Women in Leadership and Entrepreneurship webinar today. I'm Melissa Frick, one of the business training managers here, and I'll host today's webinar. I'll just go through some housekeeping with you and then I'll introduce you to our wonderful speakers this morning. So this is a wonderful webinar and it's got some great information for you, but it is not in place of any personalized advice for you and your business. If you'd wish to discuss this with someone, there will be a feedback form at the end and you can drop in the notes that you'd like to talk to someone and we can get someone to reach out to you after this morning's webinar. Today we are using Zoom for our webinar with you. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers for you at the end, and you can drop these in the chat box for us throughout the session and we will ask Astrud and Alexia at the end. You've all been auto muted and your cameras disabled for the session so that we don't have any background noise or anything like that. But please, as I said, drop your questions in the chat box because there'll be plenty of time at the end of the session. Now I'd like to introduce our wonderful speakers to you on screen. So we have Alexia here, founder of GirlBoss New Zealand. This is New Zealand's largest organisation for young women, and her mission is to get the women to the board table. Alexia, are you there? And she really thinks it's great to pave the way for our women across the road. So she'll share her wonderful story with you today and she'll pop up in a minute. In the meanwhile, we have Astrud Burgess, our General Manager of Data and Marketing. Good morning, Astrud. She's had 22 years of marketing and data across New Zealand and the United Kingdom and many senior positions across in her amazing career. And she's a massive supporter of our LGBTQI and also Pride, and a member of the Global Women. Good morning, Astrud.
Good morning, Mel. How are you?
Great, thank you. Alexia, we'll just check she's there so we can just say hello.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. I'm so delighted to be with you all this morning. My name is Alexia and we're starting off with this great riddle right here. So if anyone could please drop in the chat below what you think is the answer to this riddle. I absolutely love this riddle. So let's fill those chat boxes with what we think the answer is to this riddle. Fantastic. Oh, I think some people may have heard this one before. Well done to Courtney, Louise, and Brody, who grandfather, it's his mum. People are really giving me good guesses here. So the correct answer is the surgeon was his mother. And what I love about this riddle is it just provides some insight into the sort of subconscious bias that we can face when we're looking at particularly in STEM roles. So my name is Alexia, I'm part Greek, part Samoan, and I'm the founder and CEO of GirlBoss New Zealand, an organisation I started when I was 16 and in high school to get young women into science, technology, engineering, maths, leadership, and entrepreneurship. And I was really reflecting on where to start my story today around my journey, and I thought, why not start at the #1 most Googled question about me, which is actually about my parents. So this is quite funny. For some reason, this is the question that everyone wants to know. So I thought, let's start right there. And I've got a bit of a funny story, and it's actually the story that my mum likes to tell people at very formal occasions, typically award schemes and the like. And that is the story of how my mum and dad met. Now, this is quite an embarrassing story. I would actually appreciate if she didn't run around telling everyone as soon as she meets them. But my mum met my dad as a young Kiwi backpacker on her very first OE in the Greek islands, and she met my dad at a gay nightclub in Mykonos. So this right here is sort of really where my story begins. Now, neither of the men in this photo is my dad. This is me just researching my ancestry. So my mum was a young Kiwi backpacker on her very first OE. She met my dad, a bouncer at a nightclub in Mykonos. And then 9 months later, I was a souvenir from her very first OE. And when I reflect on some of my earliest memories of my childhood, it was my mum, a very young mum who had so much life experience, but very little cash. And I remember my mum and we shared a room. We lived in the back of a hairdressing salon in Kelston. And some of my earliest memories was of my mum having multiple jobs, deciding to go to university whilst having me as a young child, being the first in her family to go to higher education. And when it comes to women in leadership, for me, it really does start there, from seeing a woman be so entrepreneurial and really stand up as a matriarch for our family. And she taught me many things, definitely what to avoid, but also the power of taking ownership of your situation and realizing you have true power and control of your destiny. And just the other day, I was actually going through old slides of files on my computer, and I found my homework assignment I created when I was 8 years old. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to present this today. And the homework assignment was to create my very first CV. So here it is, my CV at age 8. And I quite like it because it gives a bit of insight into me as a young person and what my hobbies and passions were. And as you can see in that red circle, my hobbies at 8 years old were, I love the computer and I like making PowerPoints, which is quite funny because I now travel around the country and speak to over 100 high schools a year. And that involves making a lot of PowerPoints. So I'm truly living the childhood dream. But from a young age, I was really passionate about technology, and I would spend my days in primary school in the computer lab working and coding. But what I found is as I started to get older, my passion for technology made me feel rather isolated. And I started to feel a little bit like the odd one out. In year 12, I was the only girl in my school's digital technology class. And later in year 13, I was the only girl in my advanced physics class. And I'll go to coding competitions and science competitions and regularly be one of 2-3 young women in the room. And I just couldn't understand when my female friends were so intelligent and so capable, but didn't always have the confidence to step into these spaces. I wasn't deterred by that, however, and I continued following my passion for tech. I remember just a few months into year 12, I entered a business competition put on by a local university. And I remember they had this really inspirational speaker come to the stage, and he did a really compelling speech. And he said, if you work hard, if you study hard, if you put in the hours, one day you can grow up to be like these guys. And he showed this exact picture here. I literally was so stoked when I found it on Google because this is the exact picture he showed. And I remember sitting there as a high school student, one of the only girl in the room in this business competition going, I don't know if I see myself in these guys. I don't know how hard I study or how many hours I put in if I'll ever grow up to be like these guys. Does anyone want to give a guess in the chat who these guys are? They're very famous founders, and they started a company that starts with a P. Anyone want to give their guesses? Companies that start with P. It's a payment company. Oh, that's good on you. Candice, right in there, and Lindsay with the correct answer, PayPal. So this is the founding members of PayPal. They're now some of the most powerful founders in Silicon Valley, and they're referred to today as the PayPal Mafia, which just goes to show you're not uncool, you're just not rich yet. So I continued following my passion for business, passion for technology, and I entered another coding competition a few months later again. And I was so delighted that after 2 days of intensive coding and studying and putting in the hours, I was delighted to be announced a winner. Now, this was pretty exciting. I was 16 and on track to achieve my dreams. I just won a full ride scholarship to study computer science, a paid job at IBM, and all of the technology equipment I could possibly imagine. So as you can expect, I'm feeling pretty thrilled and feeling pretty cool, actually. And the next day, I walk into my technology class and my proud teacher announces the news to the boys in my class. Now, because I'm feeling pretty cool, I'm expecting a bit of fanfare, to be honest. You know, perhaps my computer in the computer lab would be engraved in my honor, Alexia coded here. Perhaps, you know, I would get a standing ovation as I walked into the room, you know, just some of the sort of standard fanfare I was expecting. But instead I got a completely different reaction. You only won because you're a girl. They probably just wanted you for the promotional ads. I thought that was quite the compliment, actually. Girls' brains are smaller than boys' brains. It's been scientifically proven, and that's why they're not in tech. Yes, really, all the way back in 2015. And I remember sitting there as a high school student and this being a truly defining moment for me. I just completely broke down. And I started to wonder, are there other young women like me sitting alone in classrooms across New Zealand, struggling to stay true to themselves and their ambitions? And they say injustice is a great place for resolve to take hold. Spurred by this feeling and the injustice of it, I started GirlBoss New Zealand at age 16, an organisation to encourage young women into business tech. We've run programs all across the country. And it's been a pretty incredible journey to go from a place where I felt so isolated and alone to now a network of over 13,500 young women nationwide, and our programs implemented in over 100 high schools. And I just can't believe that I went from this small idea to something that's changing the lives of thousands of young women each and every day. And every single thing that we do for young women is absolutely free, thanks to support from our 3 major sponsors, PwC, ANZ, and Spark. And that enables everything we do to be completely free for young women. So I often refer to these 3 companies as our holy trinity because they make everything we do truly possible. And hearing from young women saying that being part of GirlBoss has changed the way they walk down the street, they feel more connected to others and they feel empowered is truly what gets me out of bed each morning. And my love for business and my passion for gender equality has taken me to places I never could have imagined when I was sitting in that tech classroom just a few years ago. Places like here at Buckingham Palace, where I got to meet this woman, who some of you may recognise, which is Her Majesty the Queen, and I received the Queen's Young Leaders Medal for services to the Commonwealth. And I received that when I was 18 years old, and at that time, and still today, I'm the youngest person to hold a Queen's Medal, which is a pretty humbling experience. And I've actually got a little bit of a funny story about when I met the Queen. So when I got the call that I'd been selected from over 20,000 nominations and was going to be named this year as a Queen's Young Leader, I have to be honest with you. When I got the call, my first thought was, OMG, what am I going to wear? I'm going to be honest, that was my first thought. I was going, OMG, what am I going to wear? So in the 6 months, and there's a lot of due diligence that comes up to this moment, I am 100% focused on what I'm going to wear, what my hair's going to look like, and what earrings I'm going to wear. So that was 100% my focus, being honest with you all. And it wasn't until I got to Buckingham Palace and they announced my name, Alexia Hilbertidou from New Zealand, and I had to march down the aisle to meet the Queen. that I thought to myself for the first time, what am I going to say when I meet the Queen? So I'm literally walking towards the Queen in the grand ballroom thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? I get to the Queen, I do my curtsy, and the first thing I said to the Queen was this. Hello, did you know there's more CEOs named John than CEOs who are women on the New Zealand Stock Exchange? That was the first thing I said to the Queen. Like most people would be normal and say, hello, Your Majesty, how are you? I was like, hello, fun fact. Now the Queen, she reacted by bursting out laughing. So the Queen was literally laughing at me. And then I said, don't worry, the young women of New Zealand that I work with are going to change this. And the Queen, she sort of pulled herself together, stopped laughing and responded, very good. So the point of the story, and what I like to tell the young women in my workshops, is that the Queen believes in you. But pretty funny and also slightly embarrassing, but I did end up being a Daily Mail clickbait article. Click here to find out what made the Queen laugh. So that was a little bit of a life highlight there. And it really was such an extraordinary time around this point. I was getting phone calls and emails. I was literally refreshing my inbox with so many opportunities. I was asked to do a TV show. I was asked to fly with NASA as the youngest NASA Sophia scientific communicator. And I was getting speaking requests from all over the world, speaking on stages alongside Richard Branson, J.K. Rowling. And I really just couldn't believe that everything I'd always dreamed about was coming true, beyond my wildest imaginations. And I was just really feeling like Mrs. Worldwide on my sort of global tour of, my greatest childhood dreams coming true. And then crickets. So what happened was COVID hit and everything stopped. At this point, GirlBoss was 100% focused on in-person workshops. We had all these schools, 100 schools all lined up. I was traveling all across the country. I had speaking engagements in almost every continent, all lined up. And we lost, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work, of programs, of thousands of young women which we were supposed to reach, really in the matter of 5 days and the first lockdown in New Zealand. And I remember just feeling absolutely devastated. I had no idea what to do. I just felt so hopeless and so helpless. And it was really one of the lowest points in my journey. I just didn't know. I felt like I let so many people down. I had to share the news with some of my employees and they burst out crying. And this was a lot for someone who's only 19, 20 years old to sort of navigate. And I went from sort of this Mrs. Worldwide and feeling like the whole world was at my feet to literally Mrs. Netflix and just watching Netflix and feeling sorry for myself. But then I started to wonder, if I'm feeling so helpless, if I'm feeling so hopeless about my future, what do the young women of New Zealand feel like? What does the average high school student feel like? What do the young people of New Zealand feel like? And I sort of picked myself up and I thought, someone's got to do something about this. And I started GirlBoss Edge, which was an online career accelerator program for young women. And this went absolutely crazy. So I literally went from watching Netflix to basically running a virtual online school with thousands of young women taking part in programs. It was a full intensive, basically like school holiday program, but actually during school time that young people were tuning into. We're very lucky to have support from the Ministry of Education, and we were the largest COVID-19 response project funded by the New Zealand government. We got incredible results with 1,600 young people completing the 10-day online program. We had hundreds of mentors all across the country mentoring and supporting these young women, a 93% completion rate, which is almost unheard of for a virtual program, and over 90% of our students describing the program as life-changing. And really was so humbling for me to take something that was genuinely one of the lowest points of my life and turning that frustration into something that was making a real difference for young women. And when I really reflect on my journey, I feel so humbled that we live in a time and we live in a sort of an era where it's possible for a young woman who's raised below the poverty line in West Auckland to go on to achieve so many incredible things that were just beyond my wildest imaginations. Like here with NASA as part of the NASA Sophia deployment. At the UN, I was the youngest New Zealander selected to represent New Zealand at the UN, which was actually a childhood dream of mine. Also at Facebook, where I was selected as a Facebook Leadership Fellow. This is the name-dropping part of the presentation, team. But the highlight of my journey was actually meeting this guy, Jamie Oliver. Now, does anyone in the chat know who Jamie Oliver is? Anyone want to let me know in the chat if you know who Jamie Oliver is? Big fan, says Bridget. Yes, okay. If you know who Jamie Oliver is, let me know, because not everyone knows, especially when you're with young people, not everyone knows who Jamie Oliver is. Yep, Angela's got it right. She said chef. Jamie Oliver, yes, he's a celebrity chef, and he's the owner of a $500 million cooking empire. He also loves to mentor young people, and I was very lucky I got selected to be mentored by Jamie Oliver. Isn't that just nuts? Because I love food, and to go and to Jamie Oliver HQ and get this food was so brilliant, and then of course to meet Jamie and have lunch with Jamie. And Jamie is the single most charismatic person I have ever met. It's really hard to describe, but when he walks into a room, he truly lights up the whole room. It's like there's a golden halo around him. He really is something special. He also is the greatest people leader I have ever met. As a founder, as a business owner, I've never been in an organization where there's staff, and he's got over 500 staff, are just so passionate and inspired each and every day. And I think he really has a unique approach to leading teams, and it's something that inspires me every day. And he shared with me a piece of advice that I would love to share with you now. And he started by sharing his own story. He said, Alexia, when I was 25, I made the decision to start my very first restaurant. And when I made this decision, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different. So the criteria for who could work at Jamie's very first restaurant was 1, be homeless, 2, have drug and alcohol problems, or 3, have just left prison. That was the criteria for who was allowed to work at Jamie's very first restaurant. Now, when he shared this mission with the people around him, they thought he was absolutely nuts. Jamie's own father didn't speak to him for a year, as he thought he was throwing away his life to give a hand up to others. But Jamie's decision to do something different propelled him and his restaurant to global fame. Once people heard about the mission, they were waiting months in advance to get a table. It was the single most decision which completely changed Jamie's life forever. And he shared this story with me, and then he said, when you walk into a boardroom, when you walk into a meeting, who is the person that holds the most power? Who is the leader? The one with the most hope. Be the one with hope, be the one with vision, be the one with optimism. And here in New Zealand, we tend to shrink ourselves and we make ourselves smaller. But when we project hope and vision, we give permission to others to do the same. I also got to meet this guy, David Beckham. Now, let me know in the chat if you know who David Beckham is. Let me know in the chat. Who knows who David Beckham is? Now, the reason I ask is, yep, footballer, footy, soccer fanatic. Good guesses. We've got lots of people do know. Now, if you want to feel like you're out of touch with just models, says Vanessa. Well done, Vanessa. This might be a good chance to pause and reflect on some of the messages so far. Now, if you want to feel a bit out of touch with just Gen Z, just know that the average child, like 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old girl in New Zealand high school today has no idea who David Beckham is. Absolutely no idea. I tell them I met David Beckham and I get nothing, just crickets from them all. So then I start saying, what about the Spice Girls? And I have to, blasphemy, says Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa. And then I say, what about the Spice Girls? And they're like, oh, I think my mum listens to that. And so that makes me feel very old. But they do know his son, who's an Instagram influencer. So they go, oh, is that Brooklyn's dad? Anyway, I've got a hilarious story that I'd like to finish on, which is when I got to meet David Beckham. So I met David Beckham at the networking function after I received my medal from the Queen. And there was all these celebrities all from all around the world there. And I look over and I see David Beckham, one of the most famous footballers in the world today, standing sad and lonely by the juice table. So I think to myself, well, I better do my good deed of the day and go cheer up David Beckham. So I bounce over to David Beckham and then we're chatting away. We're talking about GirlBoss, we're talking about London, we're talking about gender politics, New Zealand, the usual combo. And then a royal staffer walks up to David and I. And the royal staffer turns to us and says, excuse me, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan request your presence. David goes, oh, mine. The royal staffer goes, oh, no, sorry, Miss Alexia's. And as I'm being escorted away from David Beckham to have my one-on-one with Prince Harry and Meghan, I'm thinking to myself, my life will never top this level of cool. So that was definitely one of the most surreal moments on my journey. And I thought, how did I end up from one girl sitting alone in a coding competition to standing up David Beckham at Buckingham Palace? And this was also me with Prince Harry and Meghan. And this was their first ever royal engagement after their wedding. They literally came from their honeymoon straight to here, which was pretty exciting. And when I reflect on my journey, one thing is clear. I wasn't the most intelligent person at my high school. I wasn't selected for any traditional leadership roles. I was not a head girl or anything like that. But I was never afraid to take the uncommon path. I was never afraid to be a little bit weird and be a little bit different. I remember when I told my mum at 16 that I wanted to start my very own social enterprise. And she replied, why don't you go to university, get a normal job, and then you can just donate to charity. When I told my careers counsellor that I wanted to forego $83,000 in university scholarships to work full-time on GirlBoss, he replied, why don't you go to university first and then you can work on GirlBoss? But I chose to ignore this very sensible advice, spurred by the belief that if you want opportunities that not many people get, you need to make choices that not many people make. You need to make the choice to be the most hopeful person in the room. You need to make the choice to be unapologetically ambitious. You need to make the choice to see hope in times where it feels like hope is not there. And as for my mum, she now works full-time for me, so I truly did get the last laugh there. So I'd like to give a massive thank you to each and every one of you for listening to my story today. It's such an honor to be here. Thanks to ANZ who support all of the work that we do. I'm going to now pass over to Astrud, who's going to share her story, but a big thank you to each and every one of you.
Thank you, Alexia. So inspiring as ever to talk to you. I told my daughter I was on a presentation with you this morning, and she's like, Alexia, she's cool. So I've already got credit home. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Astrud.
Hey, I thought I would talk a little bit about why we're working with GirlBoss, share perhaps a little bit of my own story, and then I think we're going to move to questions. So Alexia said when she talks to young girls, she says, I believe in you and the Queen believes in you. And I think the thing is, ANZ also believes that there's a place for women in tech and in leadership. So I was counting up while I was talking to, Alexia was talking, to see how many people in my team, which is the New Zealand leadership team, are women. And it's over half. And that's because we believe that women have a place, at the leadership table, at the board table, and we're taking that. But what we also see is not enough young women coming into tech, and particularly in my space, which is data, we just don't see people wanting to take up those opportunities. So by working with Alexia, by encouraging and supporting her message of hope and belief, we hope that we can start to grow the people who apply for roles at ANZ. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about ANZ and what we've been doing. One of the things that we know is that if you want to bring women into a leadership position, you really need to have a place where they're going to fit in. So we've worked very hard. We're nowhere near where we would like to be, but at least 35% of our leadership roles are held by women, and 45% of them are in management roles. It's good. It's a start. It's okay. We'll make more progress. It's in the tech space that we don't see as many women coming through. So, I have a daughter who's 15, and I'm certainly encouraging her into STEM. And I think we need to make sure that young women see it as a really viable career opportunity. And that's part of the job that we all need to do, not just, as parents or as employers, but also as people who interact with young women in a community, and encourage people to work in STEM, because it's really exciting. I have 2 teams at the bank. One of them does marketing, and it would be 90% women, and the other which does data engineering and data. And the number of young women coming into that is just not there in the same degree, nor is the number of Marianne Pacifica women. So we also have a lot to do in that space as well. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about my story. And I guess the hope that I want to offer you, for those of you who were inspired by Alexia, but don't feel quite as brave as her, there's another simpler path to heading leadership in New Zealand organisations, and that's perhaps the one that I took. So I did go to university. I graduated from university. I got a job on the ANZ grad program. I spent a lot of time learning how to do marketing. That was great. I then went and worked to a competitor, and then I went over to London. I always joke with my family that I went to London with a backpack and came home with a husband and 2 children, and had only intended to stay for 6 months, but didn't get back for 10 years. So I loved London with a fierce passion. But when I got there, I couldn't get a job. They said, you have no London experience, so you couldn't possibly do marketing in London. So I'd always been a bit techie and nerdy. So I sat in my brother's spare bedroom, and I learned how to do access databases from a book, 3 books, I think, before I got a job. And I just kept plugging away at it. And then I built databases to manage satellites for cable and wireless, which I have always found to be very scary, because I'm worried that they lost a satellite somewhere, but hopefully not. And that experience was enough to get me jobs in London. So I joined the .com boom and for those of you who are unlucky enough not to be part of it, it was sheer crazy. And yeah, I totally recommend it. Never be afraid of a bubble career. It may not last very long, but at least it's amusing on the way through. And we did some mad stuff. When it burst, as invariably it did, I set up a company with an old boss of mine called Marbox. We arrogantly believed that we could do advertising better than advertising agencies. And we worked together for a long time until I returned to New Zealand and to ANZ to raise my children. One of the things Alexia spoke about was being unapologetically ambitious. And I think that's really true. You have to be ambitious if you want your career to go places. And I think that sometimes means being vulnerable, asking people for a promotion, putting your hand up when you think you're not ready, doing all of those things that scare you. When I first got a job on the New Zealand leadership team, I was terrified. I had to go into the bathroom and practice my power poses before reviews with my boss, who was quite a gruff individual. But I did it, and you just push yourself, and then you achieve the things that you need to do. And the reason that I put up my picture of my family as well is because I think many women believe that you have to make a choice, and there's simply no need to make a choice. I raised my kids, enjoyed the company of my husband, and had a career. They all worked together really well. And the increased flexibility that we all have in the workplace now, I think makes that much, much easier. So I would encourage people not to give themselves and all choices. Like, you can do it all. And you can do it more slowly than Alexia has done if you don't have quite the drive that she does. I'm 52 at the moment, so you don't have to achieve everything by 18. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about data and why it's super important that we have women in data. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much AI and how many models you build or whatever, somebody looks at that data and they interpret it. And if the people looking at that data is only men, then the interpretations will suit men. We need women looking at the data. We need women looking at the patterns, and we need women making decisions as a result of that. And unless women join the team and start to become part of that, then that won't happen. And for our numbers in Māori and Pacifica people joining us, they're really low, they're crazy low. And we're working super hard to try to change that, because the same applies. If we don't have people with different cultural interpretations looking at our data, then we simply won't get the right results, and we won't get the results that suit the widest number of people. So really, really keen to encourage people into the partnership with GirlBoss is just one of them. I also wanted to talk about something that's super passionate for me, which is my commitment to the Pride Network. I have been so thrilled by how the conversation on gender, on sexuality, on who we are as people is changing too slowly. There's more to do. There's no time for self-congratulation. But the world is a better place than it was. And I have so much hope that people will be able to become who they truly are. And in a corporate workplace, people are really, really encouraged to live up to their authentic self. And at ANZ, we're really committed to that. And sometimes I wander outside my ivory tower and talk to people in other workforces. And what I see is that it's just not that clean in other places. There's not that commitment. So if you're a woman, if you're somebody who doesn't fit the mold, then corporate life is really for you now. It may not have been 20 years ago, but it's a place where you can feel at home. And so I'd really encourage people to think about working in this environment, and also working in this environment and encouraging other people to do so. That's all I was going to say. I'll go on mute now.
Thank you so much, Astrud, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring as well. And I think, to your point, it doesn't matter what age you are in your journey, you can start anytime really, or carry on where you are. Please drop some questions in the chat box. I see some coming through, and just while we wait for a few more to come through, I'm just going to run through some great partnerships we do have for business owners or those looking to start a business. So we have some great partnerships with MYOB, which helps you with your accounting, and I really encourage people, if you do have a business, to set it up properly and use these digital tools. Smartly for your payroll systems and help you get it all right. There's a lot of legislation that you do need to do for payroll, so this helps and builds it within the app. Toy2 to be environmental and help with your carbon footprint. We have a great partnership. And Expensify to help you with your expenses. So if you'd like any information about these, as I mentioned, there will be a quick survey at the end of today's session. You can just drop in the free flow box if you want to know any more about that for you and your business. We also, as well as running these events, we have a range of other workshop webinars that we do run for you. Talking about Māori in business, we do have our Māori in business series, and our next one coming up next week on Māori in business economy. So that's available on our anz.co.nz page. So you can register for those on our website and look at doing that for you and any others. We do regular ones on cash flow, business planning and the likes as well. So you can just click onto the website. Here they are in the boxes here. And after sessions, we do have a range that are also recorded that you can watch in your own time. So today's session is being recorded and will be up in sort of a week or so on the website for you. Right, great to see some questions coming through. So we'll get Alexia and Astrud still there, back up on screen, and we'll go through the questions for you ladies. I just had one up here for Astrud. So Astrud, I'm curious to hear, what resources and systems do you use to help you balance family and business life?
Personally, okay, I'll tell you what I have. I have incredibly well-trained children now. So 17 and 15, we all have allocated cooking nights in our house. I'm the person who fails the most often to meet my obligations. But my daughter runs a very strict household, and she makes sure that I do it at least once a week. So you need that. You need good children that behave well and make you dinner. And you also need a really supportive husband or partner. I don't think you can do it if one of you is not committed to it. A long, long time ago, before I was even engaged, I said to my husband, I'm really happy to be the breadwinner in this relationship, but I only know one way to succeed, and that is to work hard. And he's never questioned my need to work hard since then.
Awesome, thank you for that. Lots of thank yous, lots of stuff in there. Great. Alexia, we'll start with you, and Astrud, if you want to add anything at the end. So are the attitudes of men changing to be more welcoming of women and the perspective they bring?
That's a great question. And I really do feel hopeful that we can change the statistics and change the environment once and for all. I mean, it is something, though, that progress doesn't happen without action. So I think what we do is we hope that, as long as time's moving forward and the years are getting later, that everything's gonna solve. And it reminds me of when I had a conversation recently with May Chen, who is a top New Zealand law partner, and she actually turned to me and she said, Alexia, I'm old, and people have been saying to me for years, don't worry, May, women are coming up into the pipeline, it just takes time. And then she turned to me and she said, well, they must have died in that pipeline because it's been years, and where are they? Where are these women? And I think that just really was such a memorable moment for me, because it reminded me that if we want to create change, we need to be conscious, we need to be deliberate. We are seeing a lot of male men having conversations in the workplace and really championing diversity, so that's great to see. But like Astrud said, these changes also need to happen within the home. We've seen a lot of research coming out saying that a lot of women, even within my generation, are deciding that they don't feel they want to have children because they're not getting support from their partners. We're seeing growing numbers of that sort of sentiment across young women. It's some really interesting statistics coming out, and a big driver of that is they don't feel they have that support. So that education piece needs to be happening in both places.
Thank you. Astrud, any comments on that one?
I do think we need to be systemic. So everything from schools, which, some of the work that Alexia is doing to inspire people, how we recruit, how we encourage conversation, how we pull out different views in meetings and stuff. It's not enough to place token people into roles and expect them to flourish. You have to be really deliberate about it.
Yeah, thank you. The next one, so this kind of follows on the family stuff, that you can do it all approach. How do you manage family and working full time? What supports did you have in place? Would you be able to do it all? So you've answered a little bit of that. Is there any sort of expansion around the support, your husband or?
We had an au pair when the kids were younger. That was very useful, quite stressful, but very useful. I think you just need to be really organised and not do more than your fair share. It is not your job to maintain, the entire household. I would highly recommend the To-Do app. I allocate my husband his chores and he ticks them off the list. So that's working very well at the moment.
Yeah, I have to say my husband likes a Trello list that I need to add for him. So I add things to Trello for him. And the thing that we did, we started a business together, but as soon as he was actually paying himself out of the business, the first thing we did was get a cleaner, because I think that saves marriages and partnerships, just helping about that around there. Next question, kia ora. I'm a recruiter in the IT industry. I'd love to place more women. Any advice of how to get more female candidates? Alexia, this is right up your alley.
Absolutely. It's something I'm so incredibly passionate about. I think when it comes to some of the, first of all, you're not alone. This is a question that I get from so many different tech companies that I work with. And it's really a huge part of the sort of solution that we sort of offer to organizations. I think that the first is really building authentic relationships with young women. And that starts by investing young, investing early. So often what I see is so many organizations fight over the same very few young women that are graduating from computer science and ready to go into a role. And the reality is there's just not enough young women there that every single tech company in New Zealand can have 50% women in roles. So actually coming from a long-term perspective, investing earlier, we did a number of really innovative partnerships with organizations like ANZ, where we're actually working with young women whilst they're in their first year of university, which is a time where many young women don't get opportunities to get work experience, and it's a lot harder for them. And when we put that out, we had that opportunity out to our network to intern at ANZ. We had like 250 highly qualified young women apply, and that key difference was just by going a couple years earlier. So that's the key point. Partnering and finding out where are the women. So, going to women networks and building those authentic relationships is really key. But what we really need to do is invest early, get more young women earlier into that pipeline to really change the stats. But also there are other things we can do, such as looking at subconscious bias, sometimes still I go onto company websites and there's still overwhelmingly men all over their recruitment page or all over their grad page. So, having that critical lens, looking back at your resources again, and just really saying, hey, do we actually have women represented here? Because sometimes people have great intent, but they just don't remember to keep checking the website. So, there's a few different approaches, but yeah, build the pipeline, and then also look, are we making sure that it's appealing? There's no subconscious bias in our marketing materials.
Thank you. Astrud, any thoughts on that?
No, just supporting Alexia. We work closely with Summer of Tech, and we bring in lots of grads, and I think those relationships are super important.
Thank you. Next one, how do you unstuck and start? As a lot of times we constantly let the negative noise hold us back. Astrud, do you want to start that one, or?
Oh, I'm going to let Alexia do most of it. My technique is music, movement, and just start. I was taught to write using a timer. Just write anything for 10 minutes. And then after that, you can always go back and edit, but you have to keep typing for 10 minutes.
Cool, thank you. Alexia?
I love that, Astrud. And I think it's really similar to me too. There's so often where I do feel stuck, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel imposter syndrome. And the only way I get through that is by tapping into my why and the most intensive self-talking you have ever heard. So literally, I might get a call up and it'll be like the AM show, and they'll say, Alexia, do you want to come in and talk about women in tech, or women in STEM, or women in business? And the reality is, I'll get this call and they'll say, do you want to? And the reality is, do I want to go on national television and get up at 6 a.m. and drive across town and sit in the green room and check I don't have sweat under my arms? Not really. That's what you feel like saying. But the reality is, I say to myself, I literally coach myself when I speak in third person. I say, Alexia, you're not doing it for yourself. You're not doing it because it feels comfortable, or because you have a great time, or because, this feels really happy and in your right comfort zone. But you're doing it because when you turn on the TV, you want a young woman to see someone that looks like them on that screen. You're doing it because you can't complain about the lack of female role models if you refuse to be one. So tapping into that why, and that why will be personal to you. It could be because you want to show your children that, in this family, we don't let ourselves get stuck. We make sure we always put our best foot forward. Or it might be because I want to show that you can come from Blenheim and you can go out and be a global superstar. Whatever that story is for you, tapping into that and letting that be what propels you will get you out of those feelings of being stuck, and just saying, I'm allowed to have feelings of fear, but I will not let those feelings of fear get in the way of my contribution to this world.
Cool. Thanks, Alexia. Yeah, and the biggest growth moments that you don't always know when you're outside your comfort zone. Next question. I'm looking to develop a new product. I have a fear to let go and find a tech partner, as I don't have the funds. So I'm developing a paper MVP. So to you, Alexia, do you have any tips to go from idea to finding a partner and investing in a product? Are there ways to get some initial kickstart funds that you're aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are sort of two lanes from that. I think, first of all, always starting from an MVP is absolutely crucial. And so exploring ways in which you can build up an MVP. So it could be that you have a digital product that could be connecting two services together. Is there a way in which, until you have the capital to build that digital product, you can do an offline version? So you're building up your networks, you're building your learning, and you're also able to show examples so that when you do go to raise funding or to go for funding, you've already shown, hey, this works offline, and if we bring it online, it'll be more streamlined. So always looking at ways in which you can do an MVP is important. Other areas you can look at is there are accelerator programs out there, particularly if you are a woman, and also for other minority groups. There's some really great places you can go to that do provide either initial funding or they provide mentoring and support. There's also a lot of mentor networks. So there are some great resources out there for people who have an idea and want to bring it into action. As well as just ask yourself, well, I think particularly in tech, we can feel this temptation to say, well, unless I can go build the entire platform, I can't begin. But exactly like you said, and what can I do now to build those relationships and build those case studies so that I'm in a better position to go for funding.
Thank you. We've just got time for a couple more that are here. So thank you. Is there a mindset you have to unlearn, i.e. the mindset society put us up when we're growing up? Alexia?
Well, what I really struggled with was feelings of fear. So I was such a classic, like, good girl growing up. Like, I really was. You know how they teach girls that aim for perfection, and I was actually quite fearful. So I was always like, I was the best granddaughter and I was the best daughter and I was so well behaved. And the problem is sometimes being really well behaved does not always work in your favor once you start to be a founder or once you start to kind of be in these different environments. And so I had to consciously train myself to not always, to realize that you can't always just please everybody, and that if your goal is just to please everyone, you're either A, going to be very upset and stressed all the time, or B, not achieve your full potential. So having to get comfortable with the fact that, sometimes you're going to do your best, but it still won't make everyone happy is something that I really had to learn. And even now, what I actively coach myself is the idea that even if I feel nervous, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable, I'm still going to make sure I speak up in that meeting. I'm still going to make sure that I put my idea forward. And that is what I tell myself. And sometimes you just have to count down. You go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to speak up right now. And that can just be what pushes you through.
Cool. Thank you, Alexia. Anything, Astrud? We're close to time. Any final words on there?
I think Alexia summed it up beautifully. You've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Awesome. Thank you, Astrud. There is a few more questions. Sorry, there was one about STEM and getting more female speakers, but I think maybe we can reach out to Alexia and help you around that. But I think definitely, looking around that, but we can help reach out for that one. But look, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alexia, firstly, for coming along. You are very inspiring, and I know from a lot of the thank yous that are flowing through the chats, everyone appreciated hearing your wonderful story today. Astrud, also yourself, you're a very inspiring woman as well. Great to have you here and share your story with us today too. It's been wonderful to host you all and have you all along. The session today will be recorded and up on our website in about a week. We'd love your feedback at the end of the session, which will pop up. And in May, around the end of May, we'll be having Alexia back to talk about Gen Z. So I look forward to welcoming her back. But thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.